our first question. You often claim that there is no hard problem of consciousness at all. Just a vast amount of easy problems.
Yeah.
But what about the mind-body problem? Does it exist? And if it does, what it is? And is it possible to solve this problem?
I think that the solution to the mind-body problem comes from first sort of taking a deep breath and then trying to adopt first the scientific perspective, where we consider ourselves as animals, mammals, primates moving around on a planet. In fact, you might actually take a trick from Descartes here, who when he wrote about Le Monde, said, imagine a planet. And then he described it, he said, oh, that's our planet. And so we could sort of imagine going to a planet and finding things that looked like us. And so we're coming at them from the outside. And the question is there a mind-body problem? Do we discover the mind-body problem there? And of course we do, in a way, because we've got to interpret them, and we've got to treat them heterophenomenologically. We've got to treat them from the intentional stance, because they seem to be agents. They're fending for themselves very well. So we start our process of interpretation. First of all, we do the physiology and the physics and so forth, but then we still have this project of interpretation. And what we run into, if they really are like us, is that a lot of their behaviors include apparently communicating, and we learn their language. And so now we can really use heterophenomenology, and we can ask them, and we say, tell us what it's like to be you. And they do. Now, the supposed hard problem arises when you think, okay, well, at least they're zombies. They talk, they're intelligent. Now, but are they like us? Well, in what regard? Well, is it like something to be them? Do they have an inner life? Well, of course they do. Listen to them. There's no question about that. It recently occurred to me that a very simple way of showing how strange the confusion on this is to think of how 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, Wilder Penfield in Montreal was doing surgery, brain surgery on wide-awake patients. You'd take the top of their head off, their scalp off, their skull, and they're sitting in sort of a chair like this, and they're wide awake with the top of their skull off, and he's touching points on the cortex with electrodes and asking them to talk about what's going on, and they say, and oh, there's a tune, oh, there's my fingers twitching, and so forth. I've actually shown, there's some film of that. I've shown some of this to some of my students. And thousands of people have heard about this and seen it. I've never heard anybody say, oh my gosh, well, there's nobody home in there. It's a zombie. Look, you take off the top of the skull and it's just this brain. That's all that's in there. It's just too obvious that the people are conscious. And it would be just as obvious if we took the top of the skull off and we found it packed with transistors. I mean, there is a huge leap of imagination required to understand how a conscious life can be implemented in either silicon or in proteins. But it can, and in a way, Penfield's that's the proof of this right there. We know that that's the machinery that does the job, and the idea that that there isn't a mind there, I think is actually subtly incoherent. Because these supposed zombies, if you try to imagine a zombie, you have to remember that by mutual agreement, the philosophical definition of a zombie is somebody who's behaviorally indistinguishable from a human being. In other words, he's good company, laughs at jokes and has preferences, and you can engage such a zombie in indefinitely iterated recursive self-reflection. I recently wrote a bit which will come out in my next book where I invite readers, if they really want to imagine a zombie, to read a novel by Jane Austen or by Nabokov or by J.D. Salinger and try to imagine that this is actually the novel A Story of a Zombie. And I made a little discovery when I tried to do this myself. As you know, novelists have different perspectives they can adopt. There's one called omniscient author who can go into the minds of all the characters and say, and then she wondered whether, and so forth. And then there's the first person narrative novel, like, say, Moby Dick, where the whole novel is told through the mouth of one character, Ishmael, or The Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger. Holden Caulfield is this teenage boy talking to you. And I pointed out that, curiously, a first-person narrative novel is easier to imagine as a zombie novel than an omniscient author, because you're just seeing the behavior, you're just hearing the voice. Whereas the omniscient author purports to be reading the minds of all the characters. And in fact, of course, the author is, we do read people's minds in that way. What the novelist does is only an artful extension of what we all do, namely we imagine what's going on in other people's heads. And we can test that imagining as exhaustively as we choose. That's what heterophenomenology does. And once we've got the science for how the brain makes each bit of that understandable, there's no more problem. One time I had a very interesting discussion with Tom Nagel about this. Tom, who wrote What Is It Like to Be a Bat? And he said, well, neuroscience could give you perfect correlation between brain events and conscious events, but it wouldn't explain the correlation. And I said, okay, let's explore that. Can you give me an example where it's not just correlation? And he said, yes. Chemists, physicists can tell you, as it were, why water is wet. The molar macro property of wetness can be explained, not just correlated with, but explained in terms of the bonds of the water molecules and so forth. I said, okay, good, that's an example of explanatory correlation. I said, now, how about when industrial chemists create a new polymer that's never been seen on the globe before? It's an artificial polymer. And before they've even made it, they're telling you what its tensile strength is, what its color is, whether it's going to be brittle or stretchy, and so forth. I said, you know, they can do that sometimes. I said, would that be explanatory? And he said, yes. I said, okay, well, I think we've already entered the age of explanatory neuroscience. And I showed him the Ramachandran and Gregory motion capture experiment, where they predicted a brand new illusion that had never been seen anywhere before, and they predicted it on the basis of their knowledge of the organization of the visual cortex in terms of the blobs and the interblobs and the parts that are motion sensitive and the parts that are have a low spatial resolution. And I said, isn't that exactly analogous to what the chemists do? Namely, these folks knew enough about how the brain worked so they could say, we'll prove that we know how the brain works because we will put together a circumstance which creates an illusion never before seen and we'll predict it in advance. Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I think there's no hard problem. By the way, I've got that here, and I'll show it to you later if you want to see. Yeah.
To see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I recall from Sweet Dreams you say that reverberation or the echoic system is what makes the core feature of consciousness.
Yeah.
And the book has been written 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So in the recent studies on animals or on child development, have you got any information or any empirical facts that would shed light on who does have that capacity?
There may well be such evidence, but I haven't particularly had it drawn to my attention. I haven't seen it, but I think that we're seeing a rapid development, which I wish I'd been able to put it in these terms when I wrote the book, but it seems to me to fit beautifully. And that's the new interest in Bayesian predictive coding in the nervous system. That seems to me to be an implementation of this echoic system very clearly, but except for one wonderful detail, and that is that you might say it's the non-echoic system. Because in the Bayesian predictive coding, the way it works is the brain makes an anticipation, makes a prediction, and if the prediction is confirmed, no signal comes back at all. The signal only comes back for disconfirmation. So the signal gets tuned by selective disconfirmation. But as long as the predictions are coming true, then there's no echo. I have an example just to give people the flavor of this, how this works. I said, suppose I want to know how things are back home. I'm on a trip, and I arrange to call up my wife. And here's what I do. I just say, dear, I'm going to describe everything at our house, in our home, and people, and don't say a word unless I say something false. And for 10 minutes, I talk and she doesn't say anything. I say, oh, great, everything's fine, goodbye, and I hang up. That's the sort of underlying idea of predictive coding. And it seems to be a very powerful technique, and it seems to explain features of neuroanatomy which are otherwise quite baffling, such as the fact that there's more outbound traffic for instance, in the visual system than there is inbound. There's more downward connections going from central areas back down to V1, for instance, than vice versa, which at first seems strange, yeah. But I think that inversion is really very important. I'll be talking about that later today.
Let us clarify one point of your theory. When you say that consciousness is, in some sense, doesn't exist, are you ready to admit that it at least might exist? Is it possible, according to you, to conceive the existence of consciousness in the very sense in which you deny its existence? And if it is possible, then in what respect that conceived situation differs from the actual one? What should be added to the actual state of affairs to get there? Is it, for example, inconceivable, the existence of consciousness like a round circle?
No, I think a good question. I think philosophers have made a mess of thinking about conceivability and imaginability, and they say, well, I can conceive of that, so it's possible. Conceiving of something is hard work, and you never know whether you've succeeded. The history of science is full of cases of people, so that's just inconceivable, and then later anybody can conceive of it. I have the lovely passage from the great geneticist William Bateson, 1916, saying that it's inconceivable that genes can be carried in nuclear chromatin. Well, he simply could not imagine a 3 billion codon long double helix in every cell. So it turns out 10-year-olds can conceive of that just fine now, but he couldn't conceive of it. So we have to be careful about what's inconceivable, or what's conceivable for that matter. So I think the question of can I conceive of there being this extra consciousness? In one sense, sure, it's easy. It's like I can also conceive of massless gremlins, sprites that live in the pistons of every internal combustion engine, and they are basically undetectable by any known physical test, but they're in there. So what?
So the situation is the same with consciousness, you want to say?
Yes, but I don't think anybody, yes, I would say it's the same. And for the same reason that I don't think any automotive engineer or physicist would worry about the fact that he can't rule out invisible gremlins, I don't think neuroscientists or cognitive scientists should worry about the fact that they can't rule out this extra consciousness. It's
but what
it's
it
a
is
trivial possibility.
This extra consciousness, how do you conceive it, this extra consciousness, which actually doesn't exist, but which can be conceived?
Well, that's a sort of a mug's game, as they would say in England. It's a game with no rules. I think that a lot of people, they might not admit it, but I think when they think of consciousness in this extra sense, they imagine a sort of radioactive glow that things take on.
Really?
And,
do you believe in this?
And well, they think it's something like that. It's not radioactivity, of course, and it's not warm, but it's as if it were warm and radioactive. It's this. Well, you see, there's this critical mass, and when you reach the critical mass, shazam! This extra property, this extra glow happens, and then there's somebody home. I mean, I think that if I articulate it like that, it looks just plain silly. So, of course, they don't articulate it. But because they don't articulate it, there's nothing to talk about. Let them articulate what they think this extra thing is, and then we'll have something to talk about.
Emotions, mental images, that's all consciousness state.
Yeah.
Not gremlins. Why gremlins? Emotions. That's an example of consciousness. Joy.
Let's just do emotions then for a bit. All right. Christoph Koch, who wrote with Crick, he's a romantic about this, and he's a die-hard believer in pains and emotions. And he once wrote me a letter about pain and a toothache that he'd had when he was mountain climbing, and he'd been up in the mountains. And he said, you tell me there's no toothache. And I said, I imagined 2 treatments and asked him which one he wanted. In one of them, treatment A, he's no longer distracted. He can think about anything he wants to. He's not obsessed with anything in his teeth. He's as good as he's cheerful. He can conduct his life. But, I say, his tooth is in intense pain all the time, whatever you think that means. And in treatment B, he takes that pill, and the pain is completely gone from his tooth. But he can't stop thinking about his tooth. He can't read. He can't enjoy food. He can't make love. He can't have any pleasure in life at all. But there's still, but there's no pain. I said, now, which condition are you talking about here? And he thinks that, no, you see, here's where I really do think there is something as simple as an error of subtraction going on. You have your image of pain, your folk image of pain, and we start subtracting things. We take away the distraction. We take away the negative effect on performance. We take away the interference with pleasurable activities. We take away. And people think, okay, but you haven't taken away the pain yet. How do you know? I think those are the little problems that add up to the big problem, and there's no hard problem that remains. But of course, your website talks about the hard problem, so you're taking this seriously.
In our previous interview, by the way, you said very interesting thing that you said that you cannot conceive again that I am a zombie as regards my mental imagery, provided I can combine D letters, D and G, into umbrella, your lovely illustration.
Yeah.
I managed to do that, and so you were sure that I was not a zombie. I had mental imagery. Mm-hmm. You are sure that I have had and have mental images. Then, however, after that, in that interview, you said that these images are better treated as structures, not as pictures. So it seems that you can conceive that I have no mental pictures. But as a matter of fact, I have them. I have them, these mental pictures. So I conclude that you can conceive, after all, that I am zombie. If by zombies in mental imagery we would understand subject without mental pictures. Is it right or not? Or when my mistake is?
Well, I have an extended example in Consciousness Explained that looks at this, and this is Shaky, the early robot, and we see on the screen the mental images, and he draws the line drawing that's over there, and then we realize, well, we can turn that screen right off. And what's inside the computer? There's no image in 3D space. It's an array. It's an array of zeros and ones. You know, is that an image or not? So first of all, let's just get clear on what you mean by an image. On old-fashioned film, cinematography film, there are lots of images. Each frame is an image. In digital video, are there images? If you have a DVD, are there images on the DVD or just instructions for making images?
Structures, of course.
Okay.
No images.
Well, maybe all we need is instructions for making images, and maybe that's what's manipulated in your brain. How could you tell whether you had actual images or whether you just had instructions for making images, which you didn't follow by making an image, but just manipulated?
But I see difference between structures and pictures. And you admit, accept this difference. I agree with you, there is difference between structures and pictures. But I have not only structures, I have pictures.
No,
also.
You think you have pictures.
Maybe. That's my mistake. It just seems to me.
It seems to you that you have pictures. And we can test that in a way. I mean, Steve Koslin and others have done a lot of experiments on mental imagery. And they're controversial in some regards. But let me see if I can think of a good test case for this. Here, I want you to imagine this cup. And I want you to close your eyes and imagine the rotation that it goes through as I turn it this way, and then when you can see the handle coming out on the other side from behind the cup, I want you to imagine that in some detail.
Badly.
Well, okay, but the fact that it's hard, if you really had images, that shouldn't be hard.
Why? I have images, but they're weak, faint.
All right, so they're weak, faint images.
Yes, of course.
And they have a property that no regular image has. Namely, they can simply not go into some topic at all. Quick. Imagine a pirate of the Caribbean. Okay? Did he have a wooden leg? Well, now, if you imagined him, I mean, either you imagined him with a wooden leg or you didn't. Huh? So, did you even get to the legs? I mean, you can't draw a picture of a pirate. You know, maybe that was unfair. I should have.
Not enough time for creation of the image.
Yeah, I should have given you a little bit more. I should give you a little more time and say, I want the whole pirate standing on the shore, and with an old-fashioned pistol in one hand. Okay, now you've done that. Imagine him in a lot of detail, and I can start asking you questions like, can you see his belt? Does he have a belt on? How about his shoes, or is he barefoot? And you realize that you just haven't gone into that. But if you draw a picture, the medium demands that you either obscure that area or that you settle it. In fact, this is one of the important things about images. I learned this in a very interesting way. When Consciousness Explained came out, the BBC did a television documentary on it called, I'm sorry to say, Mind Movies. Given that I was saying there is no Cartesian theater, we had to struggle with that throughout the whole thing. But the young producer-director of that program did a wonderful thing for me. I was holding forth and beating up on various bad images of consciousness. And she said, okay, I see those images are wrong. What's a good image of consciousness look like, of the architecture of consciousness? And I realized that That was a perfectly legitimate question. I hadn't properly answered it, not in Consciousness Explained. And then I developed a series of images that I used in talks at her provocation. And one of the things, if you have to draw it, you are obliged to settle, even if temporarily and defeasibly and without making any strong commitment. But you have to ask yourself lots of questions you don't have to ask otherwise. And I think mental images are structures that you never really have to settle those questions. That's why they're not really like images.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very interesting.
You recently published a book with, in co-author with Matthew Harley and Reginald Adams.
Yes.
Inside Jokes. It's a fun book.
Oh, I bought you a copy, and you already have it. You already read it. Well,
and, if you sign it,
I'll sign your copy. Yeah.
So it presents a comprehensive theory of humor, and in this theory, you suggest that the sense of humor is based on our ability to construct mental spaces and evaluate their integrity. So, can you explain a little bit about those mental, spaces, and just briefly sketch the theory?
Yeah. The idea of mental spaces is taken really from the work of Gilles Fauconnier, a cognitive scientist now working out in San Diego, used to be in Paris. And he was concerned primarily with linguistics, and he was concerned with the framing of, the spaces. For instance, if I start telling you a story, then there's the story space, and if in the story Jones starts to tell somebody else's story, then we've got another frame, and or if I just go into the mind of a character, we create these spaces, and right now each of us has our own model of this space that we're in, and there's containing spaces outside that which may differ substantially. We'd get in real troubles if we didn't compartmentalize into the space that we're now in. And Fauconnier's main interest was in figuring out how things like demonstratives work. That guy, you can say that guy, well, without pointing, and everybody in the space knows who you're talking about, even though you have not obviously specified a person very precisely. But the spaces solve problems like that. Well, what Matthew realized, and it's really his model, Matthew Hurley's, is that one of the roles that a mental space plays is as a lobby, as like the security downstairs, where people come in and you have to check them out, make sure that they have the right to be there. You don't just let everybody wander around the building. So there has to be a sort of testing ground for stuff that comes in from your senses and from the communications that you're having. And the brain is engaged all the time that you're awake in furnishing the current mental space, correcting the furnishing, adjusting that, and anticipating what else is there, sort of filling in the blanks. And it's under time pressure. It's important that you stay current with what's going on. So the brain gets sloppy, makes a lot of jumps to conclusions, makes mistakes. And if these aren't corrected, then you have, in effect, a security problem. You're going to contaminate your world knowledge. You're going to let falsehoods creep in and infect your store of information about the world. So the brain needs to have a security system. It needs to have sentries, guards that are looking for these problems. That's expensive. It's, you can't get that for free. So the brain's solution is to create a reward system that rewards the guards, in effect, for playing this role. It's a little zap of pleasure, a little zap of reward for detecting hidden false assumptions, contradictions in that mental space. Now, when you detect a contradiction, you either immediately resolve it by creating another mental space where that is handled, or something else has to happen. And if you detect a problem, I say you, but really the brain, if your brain detects a problem that it can't resolve, then there's anxiety. There's something's wrong. And this is phenomenologically familiar to us. We walk into the kitchen and something's wrong. What is it? You have the sense that something's wrong, but you don't know what yet. Interestingly, in English, you might say, something's funny here, or what's that funny smell? And it doesn't mean humorous. It means worrying, actually. It means, uh-oh. Then, if you get resolution, if you see what it is, and if that comes at the right time lapse, very quickly, then that initial momentary creates a sort of springboard. I call it the Huron trampoline, because David Huron has a similar theory of music, the brain, that the tiny micro-anxiety of detecting an error then intensifies the little jolt of pleasure that comes right after it when everything's all right. And so the basic moment of humor in the Hurley model, which we defended at length, is the discovery of a potential source of anxiety in the form of, whenever you make a mistake, that's cause for concern, but swiftly resolved, and then you get the little aha. And it's closely related to the aha phenomenon, the joy of discovery, but we think it's significantly different, and that's why when people solve a puzzle or a riddle, they sometimes laugh. They find it sort of amusing, sort of. So there's this sort of gray area between problem solving and probably no accident that a lot of jokes are riddles. It's the sort of cheapest, most formulaic type of humor is a riddle. Children catch on to riddles very early and love them. But there are much nicer forms of humor than riddles.
What about the phenomenon? Why is it not so fun? When you discover, there's a motion and you suddenly know there's no motion, why wouldn't you laugh?
Which phenomenon?
P phenomenon.
Oh, the phi phenomenon.
The motion of the dots.
Oh yeah.
The one that you
color phi.
Yeah.
Well, I think first of all, I think with a little setting, we could probably make a phi phenomenon that was amusing, because it would create some misinterpretation that was then resolved. But I think in this case, there's no misinterpretation. Well, there is. The whole thing is a misinterpretation, but it's a sort of, it's a sort of benign misinterpretation. Well, you know, think back to the earliest days of cinema, when that train coming towards people made them dash out of the theater or cower. In those days, maybe the phi phenomenon would have been genuinely upsetting, and then they might laugh when they realized that they were just fooled by this illusory motion. Lots of things one of the challenges that we put out to our readers is we've given quite a careful and explicit list of conditions. If you have all these conditions met, you have humor. If you don't, you don't. So now that leaves us wide open to two kinds of counterexamples, phenomena that meet our conditions that manifestly aren't humorous, aren't funny, or, of course, the alternative, something that's as hilarious but doesn't meet one of our key conditions. We haven't had to revise the model yet. We're waiting.
You actually used the word qualia many times, and a few times you say, you know, it's in quotes, but what do you mean by qualia, and why do you use that technical term?
I suppose I was just deciding that you don't want to fight all the battles at once. I think I made it clear, I hope I made it clear, that I think that in its sort of technical sense, it is an incoherent notion, but in a loose sense, just to refer to subjective features of subjective experience, it's of course,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
you know, I mean, I've thought a lot about a sort of generic problem that philosophers face, but not just philosophers. I'll be talking about it later. Wilfrid Sellars makes the distinction between the manifest image and the scientific image. The manifest image is everyday stuff, the stuff we all are familiar with, and it includes colors and sounds and furniture and free will and other minds and possibilities and dollars and rubles and tunes and so all kinds of things which are very hard to say what they are in terms of atoms. And then the scientific image is about molecules and atoms and so forth. And what Sellars says, I think I simply agree with it. He says that philosophy considered abstractly is the attempt to say how things in the broadest possible sense hang together in the broadest possible sense. That is, how do the manifest things, colors, smells, tables and chairs, tunes, how do we fit them together with the things in with the ontology of the scientific image? And nothing goes smoothly. People try, and you get eliminativism of one sort or another. Right now, for instance, I am really on the warpath about free will, because there's a veritable chorus of neuroscientists who are saying free will is an illusion. I mean, exactly in those terms, free will is an illusion. And I said, well, I just want to calibrate your view. I want to know, is solidity an illusion? Are colors illusory? Are dollars an illusion? Is poetry? Just tell me what your answer to those is, because I want to know what you're saying when you say that free will is an illusion. That's usually not a good way of resolving the difficulty between the manifest and the scientific image. Usually a more complicated but more nuanced story is better. It's the problem that I originally discussed years ago when I imagined we come across these people who talk about fatigues, where we talk about being tired and they want to know what fatigues are. And we think, well, that's not a very good ontology, but we neither want to be compelled to take fatigue seriously as items, nor, however, do we just want to say, there's no such thing, because in their world, these things loom large. Okay, so now in those terms, if we use qualia just as the generic label for subjective properties, without any more ideology than that, then of course there's qualia. Pains are qualia, tastes are qualia, aromas are qualia, colors are qualia, sure. Now, but the term qualia has been trumped up and beefed up and inflated by philosophers into a term of art, a technical term, which I think nothing answers to that at all. And so that's the sense in which I think that qualia don't exist. But it's very hard to get people to take that issue seriously when it's so easy for them to just shake their head and says, this dumbo he hasn't noticed that sometimes people are in pain. Well, well, of course I have. It's just that I think they have a daft theory of pain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's return to the topic of problem of freedom. In your book, Freedom Evolves, and in some of your talks, number of your talks, you claimed that if everything is determined, then it doesn't mean yet that everything in our future life is inevitable.
Yep.
Because as a matter of fact, we avoid many things. Can you clarify why you believe that the fact of our successful avoiding behavior disproves the claim that every event that will happen in our future life is inevitable? Indeed, if some events are inevitable for us, then it's clear that some other possible events will be avoided by us. It's true by definition. But if so, then avoidance of some events could not be used as an argument for evitability of some events that will happen in our future. It seems that to show that this, you must demonstrate that some events that will happen in our future could be avoided. And I'm interested how it's possible to do this.
Well, first of all, I think that you yourself have seen how difficult it is to articulate the thing that you're interested in talking about here. Because events that are in our future, if they really are in our future, then of course they're not going to be avoided. Because they will happen. That's what it means to say they're in the future. People sometimes say, well, you can't change the past, but of course we can change the future. No, what does that mean? You can't change the future. The future is what will happen. You can no more change the future than you can change the past, if you understand the future in that way. Now, if you understand the future as the anticipated future, as what seems to be likely to happen, given our current knowledge, then of course that is changeable. That's the whole point. Thinking about time and avoidance is not easy. But the first step is in realizing that it's not easy, because a lot of people just glide right over the problems and don't recognize them. What is it to avoid something? Well, let's take a very simple example. I throw a ball at your head and you duck. Was the ball going to hit you? It was if you didn't duck. You saw the ball coming towards you. The light bounced off the ball into your eyes. That caused events in your brain, which triggered a ducking motion, and the ball sailed over your head harmlessly. That's a paradigm case of avoiding. Is it consistent with determinism? Sure.
But
you were determined to avoid that ball.
But it is also, it seems to me that it is also consistent with the idea of inevitability of our future. Because if some events are inevitable, so by definition, some other events will be avoided. So
well, why so?
why possible events? For example, I don't know if it's inevitable.
Well, let's talk about things that are currently inevitable, like death.
Yes.
But that may be, I can imagine that death will not be inevitable indefinitely. Or here's something else that is inevitable. I cannot be in San Francisco for lunch today. Just, there's no way it's possible. Today. But I suppose, let's see, lunch. Yes, it's still early. You would not have to violate any laws of physics to get me to San Francisco by San Francisco noon. It's just not possible today. Now, that's a perfectly good sense of inevitability. There's other things which, in that sense, are not inevitable at all. There's no doubt 100 restaurants in Moscow where we could have lunch. And none of them are, it is not inevitable which one, that's within the realm of whatever choices we make. But it's important to realize that we contrast those cases with the cases where choosing won't do any good. There's just there's no path. If Dimitri and I choose to have lunch in San Francisco today, we're out of luck. In that sense of inevitability, it has nothing in particular to do with determinism. And here's a way of thinking about this. Here's a truism. If determinism is true, then every event in my future is determined. That's true by definition. Now, if determinism is true, every event in my future is inevitable. That doesn't follow. I mean, if it does, tell me, what does the second one add to the first one? The first one's trivially true. How do you get from the first one to the second one? There's no path. And one way to see this is to notice that inevitable is, as it were, one half of a distinction that English has no good word for. There's evitable doesn't really exist as an English word. It's in the dictionary, but nobody ever uses it.
But it did exist, as far as I know.
Yeah, well, it's just avoidable. But there's another contrast. We want to avoid the bad things. We want to what the good things. There's no good word for the opposite of avoid. It's not just seek or seek and find or get, but it's something like that. But now, let's just say it's get. We want to avoid the bad and get the good. Okay. Now consider the following sentence. If determinism is true, then every event in my future is gettable. Or is ungettable. Is ungettable. What does that mean? No, I'm going to get some things and I'm not going to get other things. I mean, that's true whether determinism is true or determinism is false. But for the same reason that it doesn't follow that if determinism is true, I will never be able to get anything, it is also true for exactly the same reason that if determinism is true, it's false that if the determinism is true, I'll never be able to avoid anything. But if I am able to avoid things, then my future isn't inevitable, is it?
In many of your books, you sketched briefly your theory or concept of morality. For instance, in Darwin's Dangerous Ideas, you have a chapter devoted to the origins of morality, and in Breaking the Spell, you have a chapter devoted to a relationship between the religion and morality. Can you express, briefly, what would be your, main ideas about, ethics, morality, and what is good?
Yeah, first of all, let's start with what isn't involved, and that is we don't need God or religion for morality. Maybe there was a time when we did, but we don't need it now, and in fact, for several millennia, people have figured out what is right and wrong, and then very conveniently, that's what God's told them to do. Nobody would live with Old Testament morality today. That would be viewed as a nightmare. We've learned that slavery is bad, that wife beating is bad, that many things that are not only tolerated but encouraged, commanded in Old Testament morality are now reviewed as crimes. So morality has evolved over time. And how has it evolved? It's evolved because people have engaged in that most human and wonderful activity of mutual persuasion. They've gotten together to talk it over, and they've convinced each other that certain values are pretty much shared by all. And if they weren't shared initially, they've come to be shared. And we've expanded the circle of agreement. And it's based on some very fundamental virtues that Hume described, for instance, the natural virtues. Then we have the artificial virtues, which are more specialized and have been added on as we've civilized ourselves. We've learned the importance of truth-telling and integrity and gentleness and tolerance and so forth. And so the ideal, which is not yet achieved, but we can imagine an ideal of a communal activity of mutual persuasion, which settles on a group of values. This is how we're going to behave. And just about everybody endorses that. What could have a greater warrant for us? What could have a greater command to our allegiance than that? This is our sense of our morality. It's human-based. It doesn't get imposed on us by God or anybody else. For the same reason that we wouldn't let Martian space pirates tell us how to behave, we shouldn't let any imagined religious figures tell us how to behave. We'll figure out how to behave. We'll trust our intellectual equipment and our inbuilt sense of affection and friendliness and a sort of default pacifism, which I think runs pretty deep. And that's the best we can do for morality, and it's plenty good enough. I think it's a lovely project, and I think it's very well done. He's a very smart fellow. I like it a lot. I have one sort of quarrel of emphasis, and that is violence is way down, and many of the most horrific things that people do to each other we're getting better and better at not doing it. He's right, and it's stunning. It's because it's so initially counterintuitive, but he's got a good account of both why it's true and why it doesn't seem to be true. But he doesn't devote, I think, enough attention to subtle oppression and subtle manipulation. Right, we're not being marched at spear point to work. But many people are in a different kind of slavery just to stay alive, and they are exploited by bosses or by the system. I think we should recognize the subtle thwarting of our desires and of what would make our lives better. I think many lives are blighted, are cramped, are pinched by features of society that we underestimate how much harm they do.
Talking about the value of life, it was a few years ago you published an article, and you also had a presentation called Whole Body Apoptosis.
Yes.
I think it was a surprising reply to the request for new ideas about how we can enhance a human being. So can you explain your argument and in this context explain what do you think makes a human life valuable?
Well, as you say, there was a magazine, a design magazine, that wanted to do a special feature on imagined adjustments to human beings, Homo sapiens 2.0. What should the new version have? And it had to be something that was technologically feasible in the near future, and something that you would submit to yourself. So, do I want an eye on the back of my head, or do I want eyes on the ends of my fingers, or what other changes would I ask for? Huge memory, who knows? Be able to take a pill so that I could learn mathematics better or something. Well, I decided I would concentrate on death, and especially today, in the developed world, most of us can anticipate a future in which we might well spend months or years gradually turning into a vegetable with tubes up our noses and lying in bed and with our mind deteriorating to the point where we are a shadow of our former self. And the prolongation of life, as is well known, is it's futile, it's expensive, nobody seems to be getting anything out of this. But in any case, many people, if asked, how would you rather die? Would you rather be struck by lightning, or would you rather have this long, lingering process? They'd rather be struck by lightning. But it's very hard to arrange to be struck by lightning. And besides, you don't want to arrange it. So I thought, here's what you want. You want to die as swiftly and suddenly as is possible, consistent with the safety of those around you. And you don't want this to be by default a matter of somebody, you or your family or the state, judging that your life wasn't worth living anymore. This is the important point. So I'd imagined, let's just call it a pill, but there's various ways it could be done. You take this pill, and it's slow acting, and it's impenetrable, and at some point between, I can't remember what I said, 80 and 85?
85 and 90.
Between 85, sometime between 85 and 90, you will simply just drop dead. Boom, like being hit by lightning. You can't predict it. Immediately it was suggested to me, you want to build in like a 20-minute warning. So you can get off the highway, so that you can pull up your pants, so that you can call your children, whatever. So let's build in this so you have, but very short. I say half an hour maximum, no more. So at some point between your 85th and 90th birthday, suddenly the alarm will sound, and you will know that in half an hour you're going to fall over dead. Make whatever preparations you want for that. The key to this is that if you like this idea, the price you have to pay for it is that it will cut you down while you're still healthy.
That's a problem.
And so the only alternative is a system which many people think they prefer, and I try to show them that they really shouldn't prefer it, where they get to prolong their life indefinitely until they decide it's no longer worth living. But what that means is that they end up spending the last part of their lives measuring the value of their own life constantly. Am I feeling rotten enough today? No, I think I might enjoy watching one more television game show. And, of course, everybody around them is going to be sort of looking at their watches and wondering and thinking, is Grandpa's life still worth living? The old friend of mine, late great philosopher Kurt Beyer, once said, Socrates says that the unexamined life isn't worth living. The over-examined life isn't nothing to write home about either. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful comment on life. The over-examined life. I want to avoid the over-examined life. And it's very interesting that in today's world, especially with Twitter and Facebook, a lot of people don't seem to realize this. And they seem to think that the point of life is to have your life under constant review and analysis and evaluation, and as if you can't eat a meal without asking yourself, where on the scale of all the meals I've had in my life is this rank? Is this the best, the second best, the 17th best? And is she a 10 or a 9.5 or a 8? On the haughty scale. If you go through life, evaluating everything, in your life, if that's all you're doing, then that's all you're doing. And that's a terrible way to spend your life. And especially at the end of your life, you shouldn't be oppressed by the issue of whether your life is still worth living. You should be just living your life and let the lightning strike when it does. At least that is my conviction. So I described a system which I would submit to. But I point out in the article that I would not want to impose this on anybody. So if consensus could not be brought about on this, then we're just stuck with the system we have, and I would not want to impose it. That's very tricky. We may be stuck in a consensual bind that we cannot escape from. And then individual people are just going to have to take it upon themselves. But I think, in fact, that this is going to be a serious problem. I think that people are already beginning to feel the pinch, the pressure. Old people who are confronting the economic fact that they have an estate they would like to leave to their children and grandchildren, an estate which will be completely exhausted taking care of them in a vegetable state unless they do something about it. And the figures about, I think, something like 75 or 80% of all the healthcare costs in America are spent in the last 6 months of life for people. I mean, that's obscene, that's ridiculous. And so there's already social pressure. It's not a pleasant social pressure. I think old people are beginning to feel that they've outlived their welcome. That's not a nice way to feel. But we're going to have to realize that if you don't want to feel that way, then you could arrange something which takes it out of your hands and out of your family's hands and out of the state's hands. You could arrange to be struck by lightning.
You're a well-known atheist, and you put a lot of effort in fighting religion, but maybe one of the reasons why people commit to religion is life after death. So, as a philosopher, what do you think about life after death? Is it, according to your theories, is it possible? Can the mind survive the death of the body?
Well, first of all, I think that it is almost embarrassingly clear that life after death is wishful thinking, that it is the most natural and seductive idea. It is no wonder that everybody thinks of it and that everybody loves the idea. Just especially if it falls to you to have to explain to a child about the death of a parent or of a loved one, the capacity, the opportunity to say, oh, so, she's still in heaven, she's looking down on you. This is tremendously consoling. And so I think there's no mystery about why it's such an appealing idea. Now, is it possible? Well, I've said in one sense, yes, it's possible, or will be soon possible, because what you are is the information that the dance that your molecules are dancing. And we can replace every one of those molecules and you go right on living. And if we could just store the dance, which is information, then it could be put into a new body, re-embodied. In the same way you can have a new edition of a poem or make a new copy of a song, so a new copy of you should be possible in principle.
But what about personal identity in such a case?
in that case, I think that identity goes with the dance. It goes with the information. Now we have these puzzle cases like what if there's two? Well, then there's the so-called closest continuer theory, which says that the one that's you is the one that's, as it were, most like you. For my part, I don't have any trouble with the idea that personal identity is not importantly different from the identity of the ship of Theseus. I mean, the famous example, Theseus goes off in his ship and every plank, every board, everything is gradually replaced. It's still the ship of Theseus. Now, what if somebody has been going along behind the ship, picking up all the discarded pieces, and then reassembles them somewhere and patches them up a little bit? Isn't that the ship of Theseus? Well, at this point, you realize that this may be a question for the insurance company and the law, but we know all the facts, and we discover that the facts don't clearly tell us which way to go. Okay, but we also have the sense that it's not like there's a mysterious pearl of ship identity, which we're wondering which hull it resides in. And I think we have to come to the same realization about personal identity. The idea that there's this little magical ego thing, which is either there in one of them or in the other. We just have to abandon that idea and say, no, there's no reason to believe in that sort of an entity. It's very tempting to believe in it, but there's no reason to.
One or maybe two personal questions. In one of your recent talks, you mentioned philosophy of language class of 1960 with Quine as professor and you, David Lewis and Saul Kripke as participants. Can you tell us some words about your relationship with these famous people?
Well, I was an undergraduate. I guess Saul was too. He was a little bit ahead of me, 1 year ahead of me, I guess. But the graduate students were Tom Nagel, David Lewis, and Gil Harman, and a number of others. Those are perhaps the best known. And this was a very exciting thing to arrive at Harvard in 1960. There was this, I was already very interested in Quine from having read his book From a Logical Point of View. And here he was, publishing a brand new book called Word and Object. This was the first time he taught from that book in his philosophy of language class. So I was very glad to be there, and I was very impressed with the vast company. It was a very strong bunch of students. I got to know some of them pretty well, not very well, because I was the undergraduate, and they were the graduate students. But I got to know David and Stephanie Lewis pretty well, and Gil Harman later. I never got to know Saul Kripke well. We've hardly conversed over the years. Yeah. No, it's just so our paths just don't cross much.
You told a story about gold Rolls Royce of David
oh yeah, that
Lewis
was.
or Montague.
Oh, you've heard that? Yes, right. This is Richard Montague, the logician at UCLA, a brilliant man, an eccentric man, and a rich man. And he lived a very flamboyant life. He was eventually murdered by a gay hustler that he picked up that was a dangerous fellow. Nobody ever was convicted for that crime. He lived in a beautiful house up in the hills outside LA. And he had a gold Rolls Royce. But I didn't know that. When he and David Lewis came down to one of our colloquia at Irvine, in the early years at Irvine, place was brand new, and there was hardly any grass and little spindly trees, and walked out to the parking lot after the colloquium in the evening, and there in the parking lot at UC Irvine was this gold Rolls Royce. And I had never seen one, and I've never seen one since. And I just couldn't keep from exclaiming. I said, "Oh my God, look at that! Look at that! It's a gold Rolls Royce. What on earth can it be doing here?" And then I had to go and stick my nose up against the window and walk all around it, and all the time, of course, exclaiming on, as it were, the tastelessness, the ostentation of owning a gold Rolls Royce. And David just kept his lip buttoned, and so did Richard. And then after I had my fill of marveling at this car, Richard got out the keys and got in, and they drove off. I felt very foolish.
Well, maybe the last question. We have to wrap up and go really in 5 minutes. What do you consider now as the most promising areas for philosophical investigations?
And what are you currently working on
where are you
in this field?
Let me do the second one first. I'm about to publish a book on intuition pumps and other tools for thinking, which goes through my work and pulls out the best and then changes them all. I mean, I'm reworking each one to make them more accessible, so pulling them out of the context, making them more portable, you might say, and also criticizing ones that I think don't work well. I've had a lot of fun doing that, and it's in the hands of the publisher now. So I think it won't be out till after Christmas, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes this summer and fall. But then I have several projects that I want to turn to. One of them has to do, as so often before, with what you might call the computational architecture of consciousness. And I've taken on some new ideas which I haven't fully digested and haven't figured out quite how to handle them. One of them is Bayesian networks and predictive coding. Another one is making more sense of the idea that although the brain is a computer of sorts, the parts of which it is made are very, very unlike the parts that a laptop is made of, in that they are extremely individualistic. 200 billion neurons, and there's no two alike. And in fact, I have become impressed with the fact that every neuron in your brain is a direct descendant of single-celled organisms, single-celled eukaryotic organisms, sort of like amoebas, and that they fended for themselves for 1 billion years on this planet. So they have a lot of know-how, a lot of competence in their ancestry, and I think that it can be harnessed in the brain, and that if you start thinking of neurons as an imprisoned workforce, but with agendas of their own, they have to survive, and it's not, sometimes I joke about this, I say the traditional models of computation, it's this sort of Marxist world, from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs, and you never have to worry about needing more things. You've always got a meal, you've always got the energy you need, whereas the brain is a more anarchic circumstance where each individual neuron does in effect have to worry about staying alive and increasing its influence. And when you start thinking of neurons as little selfish agents that are living under very restricted circumstances, then I think you get a very different idea of computation. So I'm trying to work out, I have some colleagues, postdocs that are helping me think about this. We jocularly call this brain wars because we think that the turmoil in the brain really is a kind of serious competition that goes on, and that coalitions form and détente is possible, and but there are also unresolved conflicts and so forth. So I have to work out some more of the implications of that. That might turn out to be a crazy idea, but for the time being, I want to push and see what I can make of it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.